What did Naomi tell Ruth to do once Boaz laid down to sleep? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Ruth on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Ruth 3 verses 1 to 7, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Ruth chapter 3 verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Ruth chapter 3, beginning at verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you are with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do." And she said to her, "All that you say to me I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went down to lie at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In Ruth thus far, we've seen Ruth a Moabitess having traveled from Moab with her mother-in-law and coming to Bethlehem, the hometown of Naomi's dead husband Elimelech. Ruth and Naomi had no money, so Ruth, being a younger woman, went out to glean in the fields for food, as was allowed under the law of Moses. Ruth came and gleaned in Boaz's field, unbeknownst to Ruth at the time, Boaz being a close relative of Elimelech. Boaz immediately took notice of Ruth, finding her to be a woman of moral character and faith in God. He allowed Ruth to glean in his field, following after the women who tied up the sheaves, giving her opportunity to glean more. He allowed her to drink of the water which the man drank. He invited her to eat with him and the reapers. He even told the reapers to intentionally let some grain fall so that Ruth could glean easier. Boaz here was going above and beyond what the law demanded of him, perhaps because he had some affection for Ruth. When Ruth came back to tell Naomi of what had happened, Naomi approved, and as we just read, there was a reason for that. All told, Ruth gleaned in Boaz's field for about 2 months during the barley and wheat harvests. Coming now to chapter 3, Naomi comes to Ruth and reveals to her what she would like Ruth to do. She begins by telling Ruth that what she is about to say was good for Ruth, for in it, Ruth would find security. In essence, what she is telling Ruth is to have Boaz, because he is a close relative of theirs, become Ruth's husband and raise up children in Ruth's dead husband's name. This was a practice known as levirate marriage, something we've discussed in the past and will discuss again in future lessons. The way this would happen is as follows. First, she would have to go to Boaz when he would be alone. At that time, Boaz would be at his threshing floor winnowing his grain. The process of winnowing is where you would take freshly threshed grain and throw it up into the wind. The heavier grain would fall to the ground, and the lighter chaff, the seed coverings and the debris separated from the seeds in the threshing process, would be carried off in the wind. Threshing would be done during the day, while winnowing would take place at night, when you would have a greater chance for a breeze. With Boaz being the owner of the crops, it would also be likely that he would stay the night at the threshing floor in order to protect his crop. Thus, when Ruth went to Boaz, she was to wash herself, put on her best clothing, and wait for Boaz to be done eating and drinking before approaching him. Then, once he lied down to sleep, she was to go to him, uncover his feet, lie down, and then he would tell her what she would do. After reading some other people's comments on the story, some believe that what Naomi was asking Ruth to do, or at least approving of Ruth doing, was something that was sexually illicit, and that the Bible is using the phrase uncover his feet euphemistically to mean that she was to uncover his genitalia and then engage in sexual relations that night with Boaz in order for her to become his wife. And while the Bible does use euphemisms for sex, I believe this is not one of those places. And in saying so here, what people are doing is damaging the reputations of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi when they say this. How do I come to such a conclusion? Well, from the rest of the story in chapter 3, we're not going to find Ruth and Boaz engaging in sexual relations that night. We're going to see Ruth being praised by Boaz for her integrity, and in order to protect her integrity, she is going to leave Boaz very early in the morning so rumors don't begin to spread about her and Boaz. Ruth is not being asked to act as a loose woman when it comes to morals. Now, if that's not what is being said, what is being said by Naomi? Well, in that time, laying down at someone's feet was an act of total submission. It is what a humble servant would do. Now, Ruth could have come to Boaz and demand her rights that he raise up children for her under the terms of levirate marriage, but she didn't do that. Instead, she came as a humble servant, trusting in the goodness of her kinsman redeemer. When Ruth did as Naomi had told her, what would be Boaz's response? We'll discuss that, Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Ruth chapter 3, verses 8 to 18, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.